Could Mr. Ryan have gotten up after he was shot?
It's Thursday. It's January 22nd. We are going back to court today. My hope, goal, and desire is to take days 3 and 4 of the Banfield case and condense them into one. We're going to look at some of the crime scene witnesses, the law enforcement officer that showed up, photographed, the defendant's clothes, co-defendant's clothes, things like that, because the prosecution did say in opening that the blood evidence is going to matter quite a lot here, and we are going to look at that. Then I am going to give a summary of what all the testimony was for the DNA, the fingerprint analysis and all of that. I'm just going to tell you what they did. I went through it all, made notes. I'm just going to tell you. And then we will skip into the state's final witnesses after that.
Brendan's gun had blood on it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is there any way in your investigation to know where that blood came from?
No, sir.
If it had been sitting in that large and deep blood stain that we just talked about, could that have transferred to the gun?
That's possible, yes, sir.
His hands were also bloody.
Was the blood on the gun tested?
No, sir.
Okay. Was that an issue that was of concern to Fairfax County Police, or was it up to the...
I'm glad the defense is asking this. I also have questions. I am curious.
The lab to not test it?
Objection calls for speculation given that phrasing of the question.
I'll sustain it if you want to rephrase your question.
Okay. Who made the decision as to testing that particular item for blood?
It came to the state lab, sir.
Okay. So it was submitted to the state lab. Was there a request from Fairfax County Police, or was it just after talking to the state lab, they said, we're not going to do that?
Excuse me. The gun was originally sent to the state lab for firearms. And part of the policies of some of us, as my understanding with the state lab, is once a weapon goes through firearms testing, they will not do the DNA testing on it.
That makes sense. Because what could possibly go wrong if it's already run through the entire firearms division?
And would that be because it was contaminated?
This contamination issues is my understanding. Again, sir, that's my understanding. The lab personnel would be the best that's their field of expertise.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate your field of expertise. And so did this particular gun, before it was sent on to firearms, was it tested for hair or fibers or anything like that?
It was all done by visual, sir. Okay. I took the weapon, I documented and looked at it.
And did you see any hair or fibers?
No, sir.
On the gun?
No, just the blood stain, sir.
Okay.
Though we watched the first 3 witnesses of day 3, I'm going to summarize the rest of the witnesses for day 3. And then we are going to move on to day 4 of the trial with some more scientific witnesses. Things that we learned from the crime scene photos and the conversation, what was tested, what wasn't. The weapon wasn't tested in this case. We saw the defendant's clothes. We saw them put on a mannequin. The Commonwealth said in their opening statement that the blood evidence in this case is critical to them. They said, look at the physical evidence. I'm actually surprised as we are going through seeing the defendant at McDonald's in the morning and looking at the phones. We've heard nothing about a phone extraction. We heard that the phones went to forensics, but we saw photos of the phone screen for the call log. But I think bringing the call log back up at this time after seeing the McDonald's photos helps, because it again highlights that there was that first 911 call that was the hang up at 7:47 a.m. The next 911 call from Juliana's phone was not until 8:02 a.m. And then we also see the calls where the defendant is leaving McDonald's to travel back to the house. And if that call came in at the same time that Joe Ryan entered the house, that call was at 7:37 a.m. So we have a little bit more timing based on the video at McDonald's when the defendant is leaving McDonald's and when Juliana, sitting in the cul-de-sac, is calling him with the staged call of, I'm scared, I saw someone go into the house, come back to the house, instead of staging the call like, he's in there now, go. So we have a little bit more timeline for that. And then we know that Juliana and the defendant are both inside the Banfield house in the bedroom when that first 911 hang up call is made at 7:47 a.m. After that, we are going to go through just verbally the rest of the witnesses. They call Matthew, I think it's Niederreiter. He is the window salesperson. He sold the new windows to the Banfields. We heard a bit about that with Juliana. We heard about that in opening statements. In Juliana's testimony, she said that Brendan wanted her to test the soundproofing of the windows and wanted her to go in the bedroom and scream and see where it could be heard. And she's like, I'm not doing that. And he's like, fine, I'll go into the bedroom and scream and see where it can be heard. And then she was saying she thought that was because there was a trail behind the house and the neighbors, and they didn't want anyone to hear. The window purchasing process began in January 2022. The window salesman indicated that that was a quote for energy efficient double paned windows. But then in July 2022, the order was changed to triple paned windows with more soundproofing. And on cross, the defense asked, oh, did you talk about soundproofing? Did you talk about the flight path of the airport? Did you talk about the fact that they live near a fire station? And asked about those things. And he's like, no, we never talked about that. But the process to purchase the windows began in January 2022, which is quite significantly before this crime happened in February 2023. But it's interesting that in July 2022, the order for the windows changed. The next witness that came in was Amy Shotwell from Silver Eagle Group. Yes, her name is Shotwell. She works at the gun range. The records that she put in showed that Juliana had gone to the firing range with the defendant, as she told the jury, and that there was an additional firearms purchase January 28th, 2023. So a little less than a month before the homicide there. The next witnesses are all scientific witnesses, including the fingerprint expert who found that on the knife, the fingerprints from the knife were inconclusive as to Brendan and Ryan, but were definitively not a match for Christine and Juliana. So when they tested the knife for fingerprints, inconclusive to Joe Ryan and Brendan, but definitely not a match for Christine and Juliana. No fingerprints were taken from the technology, any of it. No fingerprints were taken from the gun safe. No other fingerprint exemplars were submitted for review. And then we get into all of the DNA. So I'm just going to go through what the DNA findings were. Remember that when they go through DNA, they say this person is included, this person cannot be excluded, and things like that. I am going to modify my language, but of course the DNA experts never say this DNA is that person. It's always this person is included, excluded, likely included, etc. So just know that I'm shifting the language on that more definitively than the DNA experts do. So on the knife, they tested the blood on the knife. The blood on the knife was a single source from Christine Banfield. It did not come from Brendan, Juliana, or Joseph. So nobody else's blood was on the knife from the areas where they tested. It was just Christine Banfield. The handle of the knife, where the blade meets the handle, there was a DNA mixture. Brendan and Juliana were excluded as contributors, but when they sent it through further, more advanced testing, they found that the mixture is more likely a combination of Christine and Joe Ryan. So I think in the defense's closing, we will probably hear them talk about the fact that there is no DNA on the knife from Brendan. When they tested Brendan's clothes, the blood on his jeans belonged to Christine. His hand swabs were done, and there was a small profile on his left hand that was inconclusive as to Christine, but it was eliminated as to Juliana and Joseph. Well, you know, he washed his hands at the hospital before they did any of the swabs. So it's really hard to make a lot of conclusions from the DNA or lack of DNA on his hands. Are we surprised that the blood on his jeans is from Christine? No. They tested the bedroom of Juliana. The fitted sheet was also tested for sperm. That came back to Brendan Banfield. There was also blood on the sheets in Juliana's bedroom. The blood on the fitted sheet in Juliana's bedroom was a mixture of Christine and Joseph Ryan's blood. And the blood on the bed frame in Juliana's room was a mixture of DNA from Joe Ryan and Christine. That's why they tested the fitted sheets in Juliana's bedroom, and that's what they found when they tested the fitted sheets, but there was blood on that fitted sheet as well. They also tested her clothes and the stains on the shoes. Is anyone going to be surprised with these results? No. The blood on the shoes and socks is from Christine. They tested Joseph Ryan's clothing. The right pant leg had a mixture of DNA that was his and Christine's. The zipper, the button, and the waistband had a mixture of DNA that was his and Christine. On the jeans, Brendan and Juliana were excluded as contributors to any DNA. The firearms were not tested. They did a stipulation regarding the DNA testing of Joe Ryan's zipper button waistband that we just discussed, and that was the end of the day.
Ms. Tallygraph, can you see the photograph that we're identifying as Commonwealth 238 on your screen?
I do see a picture on the screen.
Okay, is that a still that you pulled from the officer's body-worn camera?
Yes, it is.
Okay, did you enhance the color in this photo?
What? What?
I may have
What?
shifted the histogram to make things more visible. I don't recall specifically, but one of the things because part of what I do is analyze from video as well as from still images, and if things are in shadow, then you can simply shift the histogram to make them a little more visible, which also sometimes increases the contrast.
Okay.
But I didn't add to the color or detract from the color. I simply shifted to make more or less visible, and without seeing the video in its raw format, I couldn't tell you exactly whether any of that is in this particular image.
Okay. I see that there is a shadow.
That's potentially a problem. It's not a problem that she shifts things for her analysis. However, you have to have the original screenshot still that you took, and then the one that you used for your analysis so that you can show both. It's fair to use tools to do an analysis, but you have to explain it, and you have to have both. And you have to have it in your report. And the problem with I might have, I don't know, is that there's no way to then know what she did if you can't see them side by side, because the jury needs to see this is what it looked like off the body cam, and this is what it looked like after she enhanced it to do her analysis.
In your expert opinion, based on the location of the blood on Mr. Ryan's hand, the location of the blood on his pants, the location of the blood stains on his hip, and your review of all of the evidence in this case, including the autopsy reports, are you able to opine as to whether or not Joseph Ryan was in the position where he was found when police arrived, when those blood stains were transferred?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right,
I think this goes.
Approach.
I do not have any further questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience.
We have gotten to the end of the prosecution's blood spatter expert witness direct examination. And between technical difficulties and numerous sustained objections, we learned more about the shape of where blood was. I think the prosecution did a good job reminding the jury after a 4-day break for them about this blood found on the defendant's jeans is from Christine Banfield. this blood is from here, this blood is from there, this is transfer, these are droplets, etc. And then the prosecution gets to their ultimate question. Based on everything in this case, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Joseph Ryan was in the position he was found in by law enforcement when the blood was deposited on his body? Objection, sidebar, clearly sustained, no further questions. She could have broken it down more, I think, depending on what the court ruled, about the motion in the way that blood flowed on the neck or the arm or what have you. I'm truly just surprised that, because it seems that almost every time the court granted or sustained an objection, the prosecutor responded, that's fine. I'm surprised she didn't say that's fine, no further questions. But if you're going to tell the jury in opening that this is the evidence, this evidence completely supports your case, I can't imagine that at the end of this direct examination, that the jury's not sitting there going, what?
Is there a greater likelihood of a stabber having an injury as a result of that knife?
I can't really say greater likelihood.
Okay. Have you experienced that?
Not in something measured as a greater likelihood.
Okay. Have you experienced it in some other measure?
Well, that it's not uncommon for, in a stabbing situation, especially if there's no hilt on the knife,
Okay.
that multiple impacts can cause the weapon itself to become slippery because blood is a fluid and is wet. Their hand may slide and actually get cut.
Mr. Carroll asked you about the injury on Mr. Ryan's thumb and whether or not it was consistent with injuries sustained by someone who's using a knife. You explained what did the injuries look like from slippage on a knife?
Typically, if you're looking at a knife slipping, a person wielding a knife, especially repeated blows, without a hilt on the knife, then their hand may slip down, usually down the blade, and they could get a cutting injury themselves. That's not an uncommon thing in multiple stabbing situation.
In your review of Mr. Ryan's autopsy, did you see any such wounds?
No.
Could Mr. Ryan have gotten up after he was shot?
Which time?
Either.
It's entirely possible that he would be mobile after the first shot because that shot went behind his eyes and did not incapacitating. That is, it did not approach the brainstem. It did not take out the midbrain. It did not destroy the cerebellum. It did not sever the spinal cord. It did not shock the spinal cord. It's simply behind the eyes. So there is certainly an open possibility that he could move after that shot.
How about the second shot?
Well, after the shot to the chest, the evidence indicates that they recovered a bullet from the spine and that the spinal cord had a concussion at that point, and that wound path included perforations to the heart, to the pericardium, and so forth. But especially that it would have hit the spine, that he would not be able to get up from that.
So could Mr. Ryan, after receiving the shot to his chest, and Judge, I'd like to share Commonwealth's 241, previously admitted under seal, could he have put his hands in that position?
This is it's not exactly a yes or no question.
All right.
Because could a person fall back with their hands on their chest? That's a possibility. Could they do that and have all the other blood stains where they are? That doesn't work together.
That does not work together?
Well, he has to some way have all this blood on his face and be in a different position so that you get blood on the left side of his face, not just the right side. And now he's laying here. So the answer is, I don't I don't see how with both of those together, I mean, there's a sequencing issue then. Especially if we determine that the headshot was in fact the first and then the chest shot. So
Can you explain, I'm sorry, you said there's a sequencing issue. What is that sequencing issue?
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
All right, I'll sustain the objection
All
at
right.
this point.
To understand your testimony, if he had fallen like that, his hands could be in that position. Is that correct?
his hands by themselves could possibly, I can't say that I've ever seen one fall quite like this, but could possibly, if he already had his hands kind of in front of him, it could fall back and they just fall into that position.
But knowing his injuries following the second gunshot wound, could he have intentionally placed his hands in that position?
Once again, Judge, I'm going to object.
I'll sustain the objection.
All right, that's fine. I think we've gotten there. Thank you. No further questions. Remembering Christine's childhood, did you observe any medical symptoms that gave you concern?
Yes, several bruising,
Oh.
bloody noses.
Were they more than the average child's
Yes,
experience?
yeah, it was a concern to a pediatrician as well.
Judge, I'm sorry, I'm going to object about medical testimony.
Objecting to medical testimony.
Your Honor, at this point in time, he hasn't testified to medical
Okay, I will
information.
rule objection at this point.
As a result of Christine's easy bruising and nosebleeds, did she need to take any precautions?
Did she take any precautions? Well, as a parent, we took precautions to safeguard. When she rode her bike, she had to wear a helmet, knee pads, hand pads. Same thing with rollerblading. She was one that when she was little, she liked to do all that stuff, but we restricted her from doing that because of all the injuries that she was getting like that. And so, you know, that continued for quite some time, keeping a close eye on her.
Did you provide her with any medication to take?
She didn't take anything on a regular basis. There was no medication for it at the time to take on like a maintenance drug or anything like that.
I'm sorry, there was not a maintenance drug
There was no maintenance drug.
Not
so
at the time,
what
when she was a
the
kid.
cause of everything.
when she was little. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Was there a treatment drug?
there was a treatment blood, for the blood disorder, yes.
And did she receive that drug from you?
Not from me, only it was administered by a doctor.
Okay. To your knowledge, did she continue to have these issues as an adult?
Yes.
The ends of day 3 and 4. We did it. The defense made their argument for a dismissal or to strike all the indictments. And what was clarified by the judge as she was denying that motion is that there are 4 counts of murder that are charged, 2 different subsections for each victim. Additionally, the use of a firearm. Additionally, 2 counts related to the 4-year-old Valerie being in the house at the time of the crime. And the court delineated that both of those sections can be used because they don't merge into one another. They have different findings. And the court laid forth that Valerie was brought into a crime scene where weapons were being used and left there, and that was sufficient for those charges. And then we heard that the defense attorney said that they had numerous witnesses, that they would be finishing up witnesses this week and going possibly into next week. Of course, this was on Tuesday before all the discussion about the weather started. I think the court added a court day for Friday this week to try to get the jury a little bit further along before court might be closed. I wouldn't be surprised if court was closed Monday or Tuesday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on how much snow they get. So the defense is going to start calling their case when we stream together again. The very last witness of the Commonwealth's case before they rested was victim Christine Banfield's father, who discussed the fact that as she was growing up and into adulthood, had a blood disorder that led to her having protracted nosebleeds that went on longer than normal, that she bruised more easily, that she had to take precautions, that she could not be involved with contact sports, that concerns about not just external bleeding, but also internal bleeding were something that they took precautions on. And they know that she into adulthood took precautions on, that when she was pregnant and preparing to give birth to her daughter, she also needed to take medication for her blood disorder to prepare for giving birth. They talked about the fact that it was discussed at her delivery, that her father was there. And in redirect, she asked, was the defendant, Banfield, also in the room? Yes, he was in the room. Then there was an objection sustained, but They did not strike the answer from the record. The defense asked 3 or 4 questions in cross. Did you know that Christine would play volleyball and handball or what have you? And he said, I knew that she participated in sports, but non-contact sports. And I imagine where the prosecution is going to go with this is, 1, you never heard Banfield in any of the conversations with anyone medical or on the 911 call mention the medical necessity that his wife, who had been stabbed numerous times, had a blood disorder or a bleeding disorder that caused her to bleed longer than one would expect and bruise more easily. No mention of it. That the messages on the Fetlife site included requests for knife play and blood play, which was something that was discussed in the testimony, which seems inconsistent with what we have learned about Christine Banfield's health. And is she going to be engaging in things like restraints if her husband could then see that she was bruising, B, she would go to work bruised, and it could cause more than just bruising for her. There were also gag restraints. Is she going to work as an ICU nurse with bruising in that way, or where her husband could see, or where her child could see? And is she engaging in a first-time encounter with someone that was requested to be incredibly violent without her cell phone nearby, put in a drawer in a bar cart downstairs by the door? So if the defense is going to continue to pursue the arguments that we started to see in their opening statement, that Christine was on Fetlife looking for this encounter and Joe Ryan came to the house and murdered her, it's gotten a lot harder for me to believe that that is something that she would be asking for, in addition to the things that we already knew. I'm stunned how quickly the prosecution's case went. The thing that was interesting that the defense pointed out in their argument to dismiss was that we hadn't heard from a single homicide detective. It was not the most dense case of witnesses for the prosecution. I'm surprised that there were no tech witnesses. There would be some tech witnesses I would expect that we did not see, and it feels like the prosecution is putting so much of the weight of their case into the co-defendant. And their case really does hinge on whether or not the jury believes things went down the way that Juliana said that they went down. And I think that's where you have to ask at the end of the prosecution's case, now that we've seen all the prosecution witnesses, do you think that things went down the way that Juliana said that they went down? That is going to be the crux of the case. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerd.app.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.